So have you ever wondered what it's like to be a really attractive woman, to have guys just hitting on you all the time, to be the gender that's in demand in the dating market? Because there is a place in this world where men can go and they can have the experience of what it's like to be a hot woman. Let's watch.
Life of being a giga chad in Thailand.
Nowhere else can you walk down the street as a man and just have women falling all over you, hitting on you, telling you that you're handsome. None of it's real. Of course it's not real. These women are hoping to, that you'll pay them to take them to do some private, bedroom activities.
Some massages.
Yes, they want to take you for a massage. But it is an extraordinary experience that lots of guys have going to a Southeast Asian country like Thailand, which is like the sex capital of the world, walking down the streets of one of these red light districts and then just having women falling over them, competing with each other to try and get your attention. They're like, oh my God, back in, Chicago, I am completely invisible. Women avoid eye contact with me. They'd certainly never pay me attention like this, where suddenly I've got women just flocking to me.
You got to love that the capital city, as far as I know, in the sex capital of the world is called Bangkok. I'll leave that there. But yes, we went to Thailand, Alexander. Should we tell them about our experiences there?
Okay, so I had been to Southeast Asia like a number of times, but when Matt and I had traveled through there, I did book us 2 nights by this beach. Unbeknownst to me, it had a red light district, which, anthropologically, I found fascinating. I loved sort of walking through there, but it was Matt's, I think, first experience of that. And so there were hookers and prostitutes everywhere. And like, you correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you got kind of frustrated with them, You're like, God, why won't these women like leave me alone? Like, I think you're even quite critical of them. And anyway, what was your experience of it?
There are many layers to that, but yeah, my experience was at first, oh, this is interesting and novel, and like, wow, what a twist. And then it just became like, I got so irritated and frustrated. They kept getting in my way. They kept trying to reach out. They kept giving me fake compliments that clearly they didn't give a shit about me. They wanted my money. And I started to feel almost insulted. We walked through several times, and by the end of it, yeah, I was like, I don't want to do that again. And you were just laughing at me, like, so curious as to why I was having such a strong reaction.
That was a fascinating dinner conversation for me, because it was probably the first time I think I've maybe ever seen you sort of genuinely distressed. You had to adjust your worldview to make sense of those experiences that were happening. And it was actually a real pleasure and a gift for me to be there with you. The part I just so struggled with is like, you were quite critical of the women, like, like that.
I was.
And I was trying to figure out like, well, why is that? Like, what's stressing you out so much? And you felt like, well, they're deceiving me. They're acting like they like me and they don't really like me. And I was like, they're just hustling. Like I feel sorry for them, like this is a pretty desperate line of work. This is not great that we have countries with such wealth disparity that this sort of thing exists. But like, I certainly felt no ill will towards them. And I think you would ultimately get to that place. But initially you were just like, man, fuck these women. Like they're trying to trick me or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And I failed to recognize and appreciate the reality of the situation, which is, why would a woman do something so counter to her instincts? But the core of my annoyance, I think, actually is probably similar to how a lot of young, beautiful women feel in very machismo cultures, where they're just constantly being whistled at and yelled at and like grabbed when they walk by and people just following them around.
It's so interesting in that I think a lot of guys, they kind of have an experience of what it's like to be a woman in a positive sense. Like they'll go to Thailand, they'll feel like the man, they'll feel like all of these, hooker women like chasing after them in these red light districts. And they'll be like, oh, it's so nice to feel desired. Like, this is amazing. Like, women have it so lucky. You saw it a little bit more real, I think, in that like, no, I'm not enjoying this. This probably made you feel more compassionate to women and what they go through in the West. Cause like you hated being hassled in that way. And so you're like, God, it must suck to be a woman and potentially have to deal with this. For so many guys who have struggled to get women to pay attention to them and have felt invisible, I don't think they're going to find it annoying they're going to go to Thailand and have like a walk down the street and feel uplifted, like, oh my God, this is doing wonders for my self-esteem.
I think you're right. It really, my relationship success privilege is talking, as I guess you could say, where I know what it feels like to have a woman in front of me who genuinely loves me and desires me. And this that I experienced in Thailand was not that. It was purely transactional, manipulative, deceitful. But that's probably a hell of a lot better than being completely ignored. I think people would rather even be insulted than be ignored. And so, yeah, it's all relative to where you're starting from. That's for sure.
Well, let me ask you this then. If you were to go back in time to when you were struggling with women, you know, I think you mentioned once that you had like bad acne, you were socially awkward and things like that. What do you think it would have been like for you at like 18, 19 or whatever like that to walk the streets of Bangkok and to have that kind of, you know, attention from women? Would that have, what impact would that have had?
I bet it would have been similar, honestly, because I have sisters and female friends and a mother that loved me at that time. So it's not like I was starved of female approval. I was just starved of sexual approval.
It did something for me. The first time I went to Asia, I was in 2002. I was like 15 or something like that. Maybe I just turned 15 and I was there for 2 months and I could not believe how much attention I got. It occurred to me then that if I was going to have such a positive experience for my own time in China, potentially if guys just need to feel once or twice what it's like to be the man, to be the one who's in demand, even if it's fake, just to see it, it might shake away some of the feelings that they've had, the negative like feelings about their own like self-worth, their own sexual market value, you know, their own value as a person. It's like, no, like that's just where you live. If you're going to a different set of circumstances, you might find that it's completely different. And then even if you come back to your original country, you might feel better about yourself. And so I wanted to ask your opinion, like as someone who didn't have the experience that I did, do you think it's a worthwhile thing for young guys to go through? Like, could everybody, if they could magically teleport to a red light district in Bangkok, would it be good for a young guy to just walk those streets a couple of times, to feel a bunch of attention from women, just to make him reevaluate potentially negative feelings he has about himself? Or is that just going to make him feel worse because it's so artificial?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Maybe it's a stage that a man has to pass through where he receives positive attention for no good reason, just because he happens to have US dollars or whatever it is. And then that's why he's approved of. And then he graduates to like he's approved of because he's attractive and interesting and intelligent and kind and all the things that he actually should be for the women that he's actually interested in.
From the pure selfish perspective of the person who has that experience, I can understand that there could be a psychological value to understanding that your value as an individual depends on the sexual marketplace that you're actually in, right? So obviously, if you're in a country which devalues men and treats men as expendable, and women are given money from the government to live, so your monetary contribution is not worth that much, you're not going to be as high in the dating market in terms of value as if you go to a place where like women are not able to work. No, I'm not advocating for that, obviously, but I'm saying that if you go to a vastly different sexual marketplace, you'll find that your value changes completely, which then dismisses the idea that you have an objective sexual market value. It just matters about what kind of marketplace you're putting yourself into, which is why I want to set up this next video, which is, it's quite funny, but there's also some pretty deep implications to this. So I'm saying this is what happens when you marry Britney. There's your lunch.
Yeah, delicious. Wow.
When you marry Natasha from Russia. So
well, that's an easy choice.
You've probably heard this from pickup artists for years who keep advocating like go to Eastern Europe. Obviously, I don't think anyone's going to Russia at the moment for good reason, but the idea being that there are cultures that value men a lot more. And so if you want to be treated nicely in a relationship, I mean, like not an exploitative slave, cook me huge banquets, but just, you know, you want a more pleasant experience because, you know, you want a more feminine woman, change the marketplace that you're dating in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I don't think you need to cross oceans to do that. There are obviously macro cultural differences in weird countries, which is an acronym, which is Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. Even in those cultures, there are microclimates, microcultures that do still cater more to these kinds of things. My partner she loves to cook for me and for our friends and for her family. Like, she's very generous with her culinary skills. She's very good at it. So it's not like these women don't exist. But if you just want to play the numbers game, cultures that promote that, it's a much smarter place to go. And I wouldn't fault anyone for saying, these Western women, like, they don't know how to be good to their man. I'm going to move to a place where they're more virtuous. And you're actually kind of voting with your feet. And that's actually, I don't think that's quite commendable, I would say, to live your principles and just go to a place where people live the way that you want them to live.
I also agree, like, instead of complaining, be proactive. And if your values more closely align with a different place, but we should just acknowledge for a moment that there is a really anti-Western sentiment from the native men who come from a lot of these countries. I spoke to one guy once. I had like an hour conversation with him on Skype because he was worried about something, like this sentence I'd said in like an old video about why Western men prosper in dating markets, as though I was promoting it rather than sort of explaining it. We cleared up the confusion, but he said he really hates expat men coming to his country, speaking down to the local men, trying to steal up all the women, acting like an obnoxious, like, kind of Westerner, thinking that they're coming in with like a white savior complex. Like, I'm not in favor of that.
This is why I love your content so much, is because you add so many different tunnels of complexity and nuance to every single decision that you can make with regards to dating. Has like 7 sides to it. It's awesome. A lot of that didn't cross my mind at first, and I agree with having all of that consideration. I don't think that dismisses the idea that moving to where you value what the culture is up to is like, people are possessive and people are xenophobic, and people, any culture you ever go to, they don't like the immigrants. Like, it's just a human thing, I think, that's quite universal, where they'd rather locals only is like an instinct for people. And so I don't have a whole lot of respect for that instinct as a default. If someone is there and they're loving and respectful and curious and they acclimate to the culture and they want to bring value to it, because a lot of people have value to bring, I think they should be welcomed. And I try to, live that way in my personal life and in my politics as well. But if you're just going because that's where the good women are and you're just going to bag one and then life will be easy because she'll, you never have to worry about being nice to her or being, supportive. I see why people would, I could easily see the argument against it and how there's a lot to it.
You spoke about how you don't need to necessarily cross an ocean in order to kind of find your people. And that's how I want to sort of finish this segment, because if you have the experience of being the in-demand one, even for just a few nights, walking through some streets in like Bangkok, Thailand or something like that, well, what are you really meant to do with that experience? Is it just like a fleeting high and you just felt good for like those moments and then nothing kind of comes from it? You go back to the West and you feel more depressed than ever. That's obviously not good. If there was a way to turn that experience into a positive, I think it's is that what that experience is telling you is that your value as a mating partner is circumstantial. And so you can change your circumstances. And so if you've been going on online dating or swiping through Tinder or something like that and you're having no success, that's because you're in that particular dating market, which is brutally skewed against men. Obviously, you're going to feel like shit about yourself. That's natural. It would be weird if you felt good about yourself encountering that amount of failure. But you can actually create a micro environment for yourself within whatever country you are based on your social circle. Now, here's the truth of it, is that if you have a tight group of like 5 male friends, 5 female friends, and then beyond that, just sort of in the orbit, like an intermix of people who come and go of like 20 or 30 people, in addition to that, who you see like once a week or something like that. If women are looking to date within that social circle, which most are, healthy, high quality women aren't necessarily looking to go on Tinder or Bumble or whatever. They want to meet men through their natural life. Then you're not going to get compared to every single man in existence like you are on Tinder. You're going to get compared to the men inside your social circle. And so that becomes your new kind of dating market that you're existing within. And that's where you can really thrive, especially if you have positives to like who you are as a person that are not immediately obvious. So if you are a little bit short or you're a little bit ugly or whatever it might be, or you don't make that much money, obviously that's not great for a first impression. But as people get to know you over a long period of time through your social circle, and you're genuinely very masculine, very confident, very like empathetic, interesting, creative guy with like a lot of ambition, and people can see that and they like spending time with you, you make other people feel good, then those qualities are going to play larger and larger in people's minds. And so you might find that your market value within a social circle is up here, whereas on Tinder, it was down here. And I think that that's what this experience in Thailand can show you, is that you don't have a fixed price in the dating market. That's the lesson I take away.
That is an excellent takeaway.